Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you folks, I have a bit of a Robotech video. This is going to be a pretty interesting one, too, because this is actually going to be from a part of a campaign I had put together several years ago, and this one is primarily going to be directed to the Veritech pilots out there, folks, because today I'm going to be talking about an RDF Top Gun program. And this is something I'd put together, and it kind of makes sense in the context of things. And I'll get into it as I kind of roll out here, because in all honesty, a Top Gun program for Robotech really isn't that hard to think of, considering pilots of the Veritech spend quite a bit of their time flying around in fighter mode, besides the fact that Robotech also has just regular plain Jane legit fighters. So it kind of works out that way. And I would also argue, for a good case, that Roy Falker himself was also a Top Gun pilot, considering during the days of the Great War, he flew for the U.S. Navy, and actually he scored somewhere around 107, 109 aerial kills during that time frame of the Great War before the whole robo-technology thing happened. And essentially, this is a campaign I actually had put together using the RDF Accelerated Training Program. I was going to say advanced. It's Accelerated Training Program guide for the Palladium Books version of Robotech. Now, with that being said, real quick, I was scrolling through that book, and you could because it's a lot of tables and how to score your players during the program and things of that nature. People who are playing the Robotech version from Strange Machine Games, the modern version of Robotech, could actually still use this book. You would just have to make sure you got all the proper dice for it. But really quickly, before I nosedive into everything here and discuss the whole schmeal about the RDF Top Gun program, I want to take time. I want to plug my YouTube channel. I want to plug my Patreon page, because, folks, I can't really do this without your support. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video around. It helps me out. It helps get me bumped up in that YouTube algorithm that I've been fighting against for a long time now. And also with my Patreon page, it's a great way to provide additional support to me. It gives the channel budget, and I can do different things with that budget to make new content. There's a link down below in the video description. Go check it out. Great way to get updates and things of that nature, to kind of learn what is coming to my YouTube channel, #soon. But anyway, Top Gun program, what is it? What started it, really? Well, what really started it was actually the Vietnam War. And primarily what it had to do with is it had to do with U.S. fighter pilots being shot down over Vietnam by planes like the MiG-21. And basically it started getting to the point where the casualties was unacceptable. So there were several things that was done to remedy this. One of them was a new training program by the U.S. Navy, which would become Top Gun, or what we now know as Top Gun. And those pilots would actually go through the training program, and it would be an advanced training program for pilots to learn fighter maneuvers, to learn what enemy aircraft are capable of, to learn more advanced techniques of what their aircraft is capable of, and different advanced dogfighting techniques, because that was something that kind of had faded away over time. And well, in all honesty, it worked, actually. The aerial kills quickly changed in favor, especially with the United States Navy pilots that got through Top Gun. Understand that the Air Force actually has their own program. It's not called Top Gun. I can't remember what it's called. But the Navy's is Top Gun. And what they noticed is the Navy pilots that had gone through Top Gun and was redeployed to Vietnam actually showed basically enhanced fighter skill and was actually doing very well in the air against enemy aircraft. So with all that being said, it worked. Now understand this is just a very rough, dirty, quick put together. Here's the history of Top Gun. I really do, if you're more interested, I really do recommend going to look deeper in the history of Top Gun, because actually the program itself is very interesting. And with all that being said, from what I can tell, from what I can see, what I can perceive, is the Vietnam War actually did happen in the Robotech timeline. Several wars happened in the Robotech timeline. I remember Korea's highlighted in there, the Korean War, World War II, World War I. So more than likely, Vietnam actually did happen. And basically, things probably really didn't roll out any different when it came to what would be considered Robotech versus real life. So there we go. Threw that out there. There's a Top Gun program. And essentially, it's the accelerated training program. Now, with that being said, the accelerated training program is more geared towards new players and veteran players, or veteran characters, if you will. And it gives out guidelines and what's the goals of the program. And essentially, when you read the goals of the program, essentially it's Top Gun. It's everything that you would be required to. It's kind of all the goals that Top Gun would have, if you will. And it runs off of a points-based system. There's different things you have to do. And pilots, for my campaign, my pilots had to go through a series of different training ops over a 6-week period. Some of them would be done in a simulator. Some of them would actually be done in real planes. On my end, my campaign, it was more earthbound. So I gave my players access to their Veritechs to fly during the training program. Now, of course, I think there's two different ways you could really do this. If you wanted to do it on, say, the SDF1, during the time period where the SDF1 is coming back to Earth, then the training program would primarily only be done in simulators, because the Veritechs, they would need repairs. They couldn't really couldn't sacrifice plane time for training. So they would use simulators. Also, the additional wear and tear on the planes, they really couldn't afford that, because spare parts would be finite. Plus, they're in essentially hostile space. They're constantly being trailed by the Zentradi. So this is a thing that you could do during the Macross saga, if you will, on the SDF-1. But I would argue that would be primarily only done in simulators, with only certain training missions actually being done in actual Veritechs or other fighters. Now on Earth, this is where things get more interesting, because the players can actually spend more time in real Veritechs actually flying their Veritechs or their fighters if you're using just regular fighter jets. But with that being said, the operations would still be simulated. So they would have certain markers, maybe like a lock-on with a missile, with the missile system. That would be considered a kill instead of actually have to blowing the enemy up. Same way with like the gunnery system. And, this is a campaign too, by the way, that was inspired by the movie Top Gun. Now at the time, Top Gun Maverick didn't exist yet. So that kind of shows how this was many moons ago I put this together. Now, if I was to do it, I would probably use both Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick as an inspiration for it. Now, during the training process, there would be class theory, but there would also be a series of different things that they would have to do to essentially flex their muscle, if you will, flex their abilities. One would be a series of mock dogfights, and that's something that would actually happen on a regular basis, would be a series of mock dogfights. And this is probably really where the core of it's going to be. It would be like, the player Veritechs versus aggressor Veritechs, and the aggressor Veritechs would actually be the instructors. And we're talking pilots that are Roy Falker level pilots. We're talking really good pilots, older pilots, that they just know things and they're just really good at dogfighting. They know different maneuvers and they know how to force people into where they want them to be. Another thing that would be done would also be attack runs on ships. Now, with that being said, I would argue that if per se you want to do this as an opening campaign, short campaign to do before the Zentradi invasion, then you'd use just naval ships. With that being said, you could still use naval ships anyway. Now, after the Zentradi invasion, you would basically make your attack runs probably more simulated or simulator attack runs, and it would actually be on Zentradi ships where they would be doing various attack runs, trying to learn how to weave in and out of the defenses, as well as avoid other enemy fire from, such as the battle pods, and then to essentially unload their payload onto the ship that they're supposed to be attacking. Another operation that I had put my players through too was actually a simulated deep strike mission. And it wasn't anything like this. It was more of kind of like a mock bunker out in the middle of the desert. But essentially, it was bomb runs in the middle of the desert. And they had to weave in and out of anti-air fire. Of course, the anti-air fire was simulated. So it was, once again, they were taking simulated fire. And that's the thing that kind of take away from this too, is that it's all simulated. The players are not in any kind of a risk, short of, I don't know, a Veritech completely breaking down, or they, flying it to the point of flying into pieces. Another thing too that we did was a convoy strike. And once again, had to try and weave in and out of anti-air fire, try and weave in and out of any enemy air support, or fight off any oh my God, I just went full stupid right there. They did that, Porky Pig. Try to weave through any enemy aircraft that may be supporting the convoy, or even knock out said enemy aircraft, kind of neutralize them so the convoy could be attacked. And then, of course, another one would be a patrol. Now, your patrols, it could be a simulated Zentradi attack. Once again, the instructors, they may be like in their Veritex and Guardian mode or something like that, and they're just supposed to be playing the part of the Zentradi attackers. Or once again, if it's pre-Macross Saga, if you will, then it might just be an invading force that's using the Guardian mode or Battleoid mode, for what it matters, on a Veritech designed vehicle. And then, of course, through the program, there's actually points that's awarded to the players for doing so well. And then there's also demerits. And if you get so many demerits, you're actually kicked out of the program. Now, with that being said, some of them also, some of the demerits might actually make them, or if they, during the training program, if they have to score a certain amount of points for that training exercise and they don't score those points, they also suffer demerits from that too. So with that being said, this is kind of really a Top Gun program for Robotech, because essentially that's kind of how Top Guns ran as well, or at least that's my understanding is there's a point system and demerits in the whole 9 yards. And basically, if you don't pass the program, you're washed out. Now, of course, you can try again 6 months later, if I remember correctly, but so there you go. That's something you can also work with as well. And it's all there in the book on how to score your players and the different types of exercises to do and how to set up the exercises as well. And the nice thing is you can actually have your players run through the exercises multiple times, but each time it be different, because like the enemies could change, conditions could change, things of that nature. So I think that's actually really good in itself. And it kind of does give that feeling of a whole fleshed out, like Top Gun program, that these pilots are learning to be the best pilots in the RDF. And then, of course, if they do pass, the pilots pass, they're given awards, they're given recognition for passing the program, and essentially they're labeled off as an elite pilot for the Robotech Defense Force. And another thing that I did too, besides of awards and medals and things of that nature, was also give all the players a $100 pay increase For those not familiar with the Palladium version of Robotech, players actually got paid monthly. So suddenly they're getting paid an extra $100 because they passed the Top Gun program. Or, well, it's the accelerated training program, but there you go, folks. I just want to take some time, throw this out there, put a little earwig in your ear, if you will, to make you think about doing something like this, and maybe give you some inspiration for your Robotech campaign. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up today's video at that. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful day.